Hey there, everybody. My name is Dr. Jason Dukas, and I'd like to start off with some kind of introductory ultrasonography kind of techniques to kind of help you along the way as we look through some of our different parts of our abdominal scanning. So let's start off what we like to call knobology. So if you want to be all medical terms about it, study of the knobs. So I feel like that's one of the biggest things I've noticed throughout kind of teaching some people is I always hear people ask, like, how did you get that image to look so clear? Like, they go on there and they just can't get those images to look the same way. So I feel like we really need to take a dive into what all the different knobs on our ultrasound machine do. And then once we learn what they do and how we can manipulate them, then we can actually get our ultrasound images to look as pristine as we want to get that best resolution and contrast that we can really differentiate normals versus abnormals too. All right, so let's take a look. I've got an ultrasound machine here next to me, so let me get a good image of that. All right, so what I've got here is a Mindray machine. So this is kind of a mid-level portable unit that I've used a bunch. And what's nice about it is pretty much all ultrasound machines are going to have the same different knobs on here and different control systems that we can manipulate to make sure we're getting the best images that we can. All right, so let's think about how our ultrasound image is being actually produced. So we've got let's say this one is going to be our linear probe. Inside of our linear probe, we've got what's called a piezoelectric crystal that lives up on the top in here. There is a control on our ultrasound machines called the power. We typically don't mess with the power too much. The power will control, is the only thing that actually controls our actual signals or our echoes that are coming out of the probe. So our power controls how much voltage goes through this piezoelectric crystal, and then once it hits that crystal, it'll make our echoes come out of our probe in different frequencies that we can set. So we typically want to keep our power as low as possible. Unfortunately, power also increases heat. I know like human fetal ultrasound studies, there are certain limits that we can even set that power to, because if we get too much heat, we can actually cause some cellular damage. So we never want to crank that power up and hold it in one single place for a while, especially if we're doing any type of fetal ultrasounding. So we always keep the power as low as possible and manipulate everything else. So everything else that we're going to manipulate is going to be the echoes that come back to the machine. So typically this transducer, about 1% of the time, it's actually sending echoes out, and then 99% of the time, we're actually getting all the echoes going back into this probe. So that's why most of our controls all have to do with those returning echoes, and how can we manipulate those returning echoes to get the best image that we want. All right, so that's our power. I say the next biggest thing that we're going to look at is our gain and our time gain compensation. So let me put this probe away. Now I will see if I can get this to come down a little bit. So let's come down to here. Make sure I got a good image there. That's pretty good like that. All right, so there's our keyboard. So again, like I said, all these controls, no matter what type of machine you got, they're gonna look very similar to here. On this machine, we've got a dial right here. Turn it to the left, I'll turn the gain down. Turn it to the right, I turn the gain up. So this is called our overall gain. The overall gain is going to change the amplification of those echoes when they come back to the probe. So if I want to amplify that signal more, meaning I want it to look more echoic or make it look like there's more echoes coming back to that probe, then I would turn this to the right, and that'll make all these echoes look brighter. And if I turn it to the left, make the echoes look darker. So this is going to change the gain from what we call our near field. Our near field is going to be the top of the image. The far field is going to be the bottom of the image, or the furthest away from the probe. So this would change the overall gain throughout the entire top to bottom the entire way. That is going to be different than what we typically have over on the side of your machine. So your time gain compensation. So you can see on the time gain compensation, most people like a little kind of stair-step pattern. So what a time gain compensation does is kind of, if you break those words apart, what we're really doing is compensating for the amount of time that we're losing. The more time that goes through and that probe is sending echoes longer and further away, we're going to lose some of those echoes on that return signal. So what we can do, let's look at that whole screen again. Yeah. And get that right there. That looks good. All right, so if I want, I can actually change the time gain compensation in the near field, or I can change it all the way down here on the far field. So if I wanted just to change it in the near field, what I would wind up doing is just altering the top buttons on here. So we've got on here, if I wanted to just alter these guys, and let's say I wanted to just change the gain on the near field, maybe I want to change the gain and make it darker on just the near field. So you see darker, increase the gain, brighter. So just in this one area right here, so each level of this time gain compensation will correspond to a different depth on here. So if I wanted to change all the way down at the bottom of these controls, kind of all the way down here, and I want to change that gain, you can see how the bottom of the screen went really dark there. And I want to increase the gain, and it gets really bright again. So what most ultrasonographers like to do is kind of keep, like I was mentioning, that stair step on here. We do this stair step because we think of something called like attenuation. Attenuation is going to be, here's our near field. This is where the probe is going to start, right along the skin line. As I send echoes in, the further and further they go down into the body, we're going to lose some of those echoes, and they're not going to be as strong before they come back to the probe. So what I can do is increase the gain on the far field, or these bottom parts of my time gain compensation, to amplify the signal, because a lot of our signal is going to get attenuated on that far field. And I don't need a lot of amplification in the near field, because I'm going to get a lot of those echoes are going to bounce off of things like a nice superficial spleen. It'll bounce off and come right back. And I'm not losing a lot of signal, so I don't have to amplify it, which means I don't have to compensate the gain. So I can keep that time gain compensation really low at these top near field markers. All right, so we typically leave that alone. A lot of times, maybe an animal might kick it, or while it's in transport and you're moving the machine around, you might hit some of these, and that'll mess up what your image looks like. All right, so we use a lot of that on these buttons. What's another thing we do? We see this little arrow right there. Everybody see that? I feel like a lot of people don't know what the heck that little arrow is. Well, what that arrow is a focal spot or focal point. What's really nice about machines now these days is they have this focal point. What that means, it's trying to kind of converge more of the ultrasound signals at one certain depth in your image, meaning I'm going to get the best resolution at that one depth where that focal spot is. On this machine, my focus is this first button right here, and you'll see there's a green kind of light on it that says focus. If I push this dial again, it goes to my frequency.